Hi, welcome to Roboflow training movie. In this training movie, I will show you how Roboflow can apply permission templates based on the field values. For instance, based on some field values, you could apply permission templates. And here's an example I have in my Cumulus catalog. I have a field called let me show you. I have a field called embedded metadata standard. Can be any field. I'm just giving you an example of a field that has multiple values or can potentially have multiple values, a multi-choice field. So you see, so what we are going to do is we are going to have a workflow, and that workflow needs to apply certain permission templates depending on the values assigned to the records to that field. You can do that on the whole catalog, and that's the first thing that we're going to do to initialize the catalog with the settings or the permissions according to that particular value. More importantly, here I'm going to do that using a parameter file. So I have a parameter file in which I defined a condition value, and something to execute. This is a very typical example of what we do in Roboflow, is having a parameter table, and then we can assign different things depending on, for instance, a condition with a value. So first of all, I'm picking up the value of that embedded metadata standard, and I'll show you what comes back as a value. And then it's doing a regular expression against a value. Now, normally I could just have an equals here, but since this is a multi-choice value, it's a contains. So the syntax here says dot star in regular expressions. This means any number of characters of any kind. And I have the same here. So I'm looking for the value of this field to contain this, these letters, these brackets, these square these parentheses mean just that this is the fixed piece of text that it needs to look for, and it's going to look for that in that particular value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what the value is that comes back. If you look at the query, you can have here a little test into my sample catalog. And I'm going to show the value of that particular field. And if I say test, you see this is how this comes back. And you see if it has multiple values, it's separated by semicolons. So that way, the value of that field can be exif, but it can also be exif semicolon something else, or something else semicolon exif semicolon, etc. And so that's why I have this regular expression syntax that says that the value needs to be inside that piece of text of result of this particular field. So let's have a look. Let's run this workflow. So if I do start, and I do show log, what do you see? That is that it found a record, and that has a value there. And for that value, I'm going to say, I'm looking so for exif, and the value for that particular field, airplane, is these three. That was the one that in the beginning I showed you. I assigned here these three values. So you can see it has these three. And it is checking for that record, and it says, I found exif in there, so I'm applying exif. Now here it should normally continue to the next and to the next and to the next. So there is some kind of logic in the workflow that you can choose. In this case, the workflow is only assigning one permission template. It says, do I find this? Yes, then apply the exif permission. And then it goes to the next record, and for the next record it finds that it's XMP, and then here again it finds XMP and IPTC. Now why does it not do 8 bin anything and ICC anything? Because we did not define them in the table. So you might think, okay, it's not looking for the rest. It is looking for the rest of the table, and so but there's nothing there. There is no 8 bin and there is no ICC permission defined. I only defined exif, IPTC, and XMP. So here's another example where we have XMP and exif and IPTC, and here it does apply to permissions. And so what I did in the workflow is that when the workflow, first of all, of course, I read my parameter file and I store it as a table, store it as a global variable. So because it's in the first loop, it will only execute once, but it will be available throughout the whole workflow. Then I'm applying permission template, and I'm applying permission template null. It's important to know that applying permission template null is actually assigning it to clear all assigned permissions, all manual assigned permissions of that particular record. And so that's a way to kind of reset the record. In this initial loop, this is maybe not so important, but later we're going to run this on a trigger, and on a trigger other values could have been assigned but need to be taken away, need to be cleared, because if you change the value, you could enable something, but you could have disabled something, which means that there's no way of knowing what was applied before. So that's why we start with a clean null value. This only exists, the reset of a permission template only exists since a certain version, and if you ever want to know if something that was changed, when exactly it was changed, well, you can look it up in here, and here there should be somewhere permission template, and you will see that it is a fairly recent bug fix that you are now allowed to apply permission template action. So you see you need a version 11.01 or 11.02 to have this applied to. However, this functionality is also applied to the latest release 10.2.6, I think, the last release of version 10. And so you need either those two versions, either one of those two versions, then you're good, then this will work. So all the permissions are applied to all the records. So now we can actually say we are removing this query. From now on, it should work trigger based. It should watch, it should look into a certain folder. And I've created a folder here. Let me show you. Here I created a folder where I am going to receive triggers, and I'm pasting this in here. So what are triggers? Triggers are notifications from Cumulus that something happened, and that something happened is what you define here. You can go to the properties of the catalog, and in the properties of the catalog you can say show all triggers, and you see there's already some triggers in there, but that's triggers on the asset users history. I'm creating a totally new one here. I'm going to say add a trigger. And I'm going to listen, of course, to record events. I'm going to listen to two type of record events. First of all, I want to listen to records for new, any new records, item added, should go through this initialization procedure. So then I need to call a Roboflow trigger. What is now the difference between apply permission template and the Roboflow trigger action? You could do the apply permission template, but it can only work on a value or a value that is set, but it cannot act on a value being taken away. So you cannot reset what was already set before. So that's why this functionality cannot work. So that's why you better off using a Roboflow trigger. The Roboflow trigger is actually nothing else than a folder that you need to specify, and that trigger, that folder needs to be accessible with full control for the Roboflow service and for the Cumulus server service. The Cumulus server service is the one who is executing this trigger. It's the one that knows about, hey, a record has been changed, so I need to do something, or a record has been added, so I need to do something. And so that's the Cumulus server's task. It's executing this trigger, and this Roboflow trigger writes this in a little XML file. I will show you in a minute. And we are adding a second one here. We also want to, again, record events. We also want to know if a field value changed, and we are interested in our specific metadata field, of course. We want to know about, and what was the name of that field? I forgot. What is the name of that field? Come on. Why are you not? Get out of my way. There you are. I forgot the name of my field. Embedded metadata standard. Okay. So here we're going to embedded metadata standard. So I don't have to wait for a specific condition, and you see on a multi-choice field you don't even have that option, and there is no way to wait to go for a specific value, because multi-choice can be a combination of 1,000 things. So that's why again you cannot do that with the traditional out-of-the-box set permission trigger, permission template trigger. So that's why we are using this one. I'm specifying this specific folder. So I have two triggers now in place. So that means if I come here, and remember we had assigned these two guys, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove these two, and I'm going to add this one, and we will see what will happen. I'm saving this, and if I have a look in that folder, I now have a little XML file here, and that's that trigger folder. And that trigger folder looks looks like this. Nothing special. It just writes the information of what has changed and what field has changed. If you were watching one field, what record, the record name, the catalog, and that's it. And that's all Roboflow actually needs to know exactly what record to process. So if we go here, I have specified here the trigger folder. That's where it's going to look. So if I launch the workflow now, it's not first performing the query. No, it's first looking into that folder, reading the XML files, finding the records, and creating a collection result, and with 1, 2, 1,000 records, whatever, depending on the amount of XML files there. Then, if you specify the query, it will do a narrow search on that. So you can have additional conditions on the triggers you want to process, but if you leave it empty, it's just doing it for all. Why do we want to do it for all? Well, if I'm saying here I could say has value, but that's not true. If I remove a trigger, a value, and which means that there's no more values assigned in that field, it should still reset, clear the permissions. So very important to keep that in place. So start, I go to here and I say start. And if I do a show log, what has it processed? Just that one record that was triggered, and now it did nicely assign EXIF and IPTC, which matches exactly the field values that we had set here. And it has, of course, cleared the potential others that it had assigned before. So this is how this workflow works. It's pretty straightforward, simple workflow, and it offers you a lot of possibilities to get permissions into your records. So thank you for joining this training movie. If you have any questions, let me know.